Insane Sam here again. The last video followed the rise and demise of the Coral Court Motel, which opened in 1942 in St. Louis and was the most notorious motel along Route 66 for half a century. It was a stylish place with an enclosed garage for each room that offered privacy for carnal capers at hourly rates. But in 1953, the privacy provided shelter for more sinister purposes. Carl Hall was a loser who attended the Kemper Military School in the 1930s with a kid named Paul Greenlease. Paul was the adopted son of a millionaire General Motors car dealer named Robert Greenlease. Well, Hall despised Paul, and he had always wanted to do his family some harm. Years later, Hall was living with a chick named Bonnie Hetty in St. Joseph, Missouri. They were both drug-addicted alcoholics. On September 28, 1953, Hetty showed up at the Notre Dame de Sion Catholic School in Kansas City, Missouri, and convinced one of the nuns to believe that she was the aunt of Robert Greenlease's 6-year-old son, Bobby. Hetty claimed that Bobby's mother had suffered a heart attack, and she had been sent to pick Bobby up from school. The nun consented, and Hetty took Bobby by the hand and led him to a Toadman cab company taxi driven by a guy named Willard Creech. Bobby went along without protest. The taxi dropped Hetty and Bobby off at the Katz drugstore on Main Street in Kansas City. Hall picked him up in a 1952 Ford sedan with Kansas City plates. They took Bobby to Overland Park just outside of Kansas City. In a series of ransom calls, Hall assured Mr. Greenlease that his son Bobby was being treated well and he'd be returned safely upon the payment of a $600,000 ransom. Now, Mr. Greenlease was 71 years old, and Bobby was his only naturally born son. Mr. Greenlease was willing to meet any demand to save him. He ignored the advice or assistance of the local police, and on October 5, 1953, he paid the ransom. Well, Hall and Hetty drove to St. Louis and rented a room at 4505 Arsenal Street. They went on a bender. They got into a fight. Eventually, Hetty passed out, and Hall called a prostitute named Sandra O'Day, picked her up in a cab driven by a guy named John Hagar, and they checked into the Coral Court. The cab driver became suspicious because Hall was flashing a lot of money around. He reported this to a guy named Joe Costello, who was his mobster boss. Now, Costello contacted St. Louis policeman Lieutenant Shoulders, who was a crooked cop on Costello's payroll. Costello went out and arrested Hall on October 6, 1953. Now, Costello and Shoulders figured that Hall was an embezzler, and they tried to shake him down. Instead, he confessed to the kidnapping and he ratted Hetty out. The police arrested Hetty at the Arsenal Street room shortly thereafter. The Bobby Greenlease kidnapping garnered the most national press coverage of any kidnapping since the abduction of Charles Lindbergh Jr. in 1932. The $600,000 ransom that Hall and Hetty demanded was the largest in U.S. history. The ransom for the Lindbergh baby was only $50 grand. Richard Bruno Hauptmann was convicted of kidnapping baby Lindbergh in 1934, and he was executed in the electric chair in 1936, 4 years after the kidnapping. Justice was a lot quicker for the kidnappers of Bobby Greenlease. On October 7, Hall and Hetty admitted to the kidnapping. They also confessed that they'd killed Bobby Greenlease with a gunshot to his head almost immediately after the kidnapping. Police recovered Bobby Greenlease's body, which had been buried in Hetty's St. Joseph, Missouri backyard. On October 30, 1953, Hall and Hetty pled guilty to kidnapping and murder before Judge Albert Reeves in federal court in Kansas City. On November 19th, they were found guilty, and the jury recommended the death penalty after only an hour and 8 minutes of deliberation. 15 minutes after the verdict was announced, Judge Reeves sentenced Hall and Hetty to death. Hall and Hetty were executed together on December 18, 1953 in the gas chamber at the Missouri State Penitentiary in Joseph City. Hall was pronounced dead at 12:12 a.m. and Hetty was pronounced dead 20 seconds later. It had been only 81 days from the date of the kidnapping to the date the death penalty was carried out. They had swift justice in those days. Now, Hetty was one of only 2 women executed by federal authorities since the hanging of Mary Surratt, who had been implicated in the planning of Lincoln's assassination. The only other woman was Esther Rosenberg, who with her husband Julius had been executed after being convicted of giving the Russians nuclear secrets. Okay, back to the Coral Court. Only $228,000 of the ransom money was ever found, and rumors floated for years that the remaining $312,000 was stashed at the Coral Court. These rumors were buttressed by suspicions that the Coral Court owner John Carr was a finance guy for the mob who operated brothels in St. Louis and used the Coral Court to launder the cash. Years went by and nothing was found. The demolition of the Coral Court in 1993 was kind of like that deal Geraldo Rivera had in 1986 when he was searching for swag in a secret vault in Chicago's Lexington Hotel, which had been Al Capone's headquarters from 28 to 31. But the results of the Coral Court demolition were as disappointing as Geraldo's Al Capone search. No money was ever found. Now maybe John Carr recovered the money from Hall's Coral Court bungalow and used it for the upkeep of the motel. But it seems more likely that the missing ransom money was swept up by the mobster and the crooked cop who were involved in apprehending Hall and Headley. In any event, the disappearance of the Bobby Greenlease ransom remains a Route 66 mystery. So that's the end of Coral Court Caper Part 2. Insane Sam out.